Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'd like to introduce your host, Rob Ludeman, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Pure Storage.
Thanks, Roman. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're so excited you're here. I'll be your host, and I am excited to spend the next hour with you. Today, we're going to chat about how organizations can overcome AI data challenges with scalable high-performance infrastructure, especially for storage. We're fortunate to have industry experts from NVIDIA and Pure with us today to unpack this topic for you. Our discussion will be followed then by a Q&A with our special guest, Zack Kass, futurist and former head of GTM at OpenAI. We'll also close out the day with some fun prizes, so stay tuned at the end. All right, before we dive in, let's cover a few housekeeping items for you. First, all guests are going to be muted during the event. So if you have any system issues and need assistance, send us a note using the chat window at the bottom and we can address it right away. Second, back to prizes. At the end of the event, after the Q&A with Zack, we're going to have a raffle drawing for some great prizes. Be sure to stick around until the end for your chance to win. And last but not least, we love hearing from you and getting together with you. So let's stay social and be social. Join the conversation in the live chat with one another and feel free to show those who aren't here what they're missing out on and tag your social post with hashtag #EngageWithPure. Now, before we officially dive in, we want to thank all of you for joining us today and for your continued partnership here at Pure Storage. All right, let's set the context here. We know AI is revolutionizing organizations by driving innovation, driving agility, and performance across every industry. However, this rapid evolution comes with its own set of challenges, especially when it comes to delivering compute and managing the vast amounts of data required for AI applications. A high-performance, scalable, and future-proof infrastructure is essential for simplifying AI adoption and ensuring long-term success. So with that, we brought in some industry experts to share some valuable insights and strategies for overcoming these challenges. First, I'd like to welcome Tony Pikeday, who is the Senior Director of Product Marketing at NVIDIA and responsible for DGX portfolio of AI supercomputers. Over the last 8 years, Tony and his team has been responsible for helping organizations around the world infuse their business with the power of AI, and he's always been a great partner for Pure Storage. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you for having me.
We're also thrilled to have the Chad Kenny join us today. Chad is our Vice President of Technology at Pure, where he leads up product strategy, messaging, and technology initiatives that are redefining the future of data storage. Welcome, Chad. It's great to see you here today.
Awesome to be here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, let's dive in, folks. And we're going to hit really 3 discussion points here. We're going to go into the state of the landscape. We're going to look at challenges, really what's holding everybody back. And then obviously, where's that light at the end of the AI tunnel? How do we solve these really difficult things? So let's start with you, Tony. So much time at NVIDIA, and I know you just speak with tons of customers, organizations, partners. And I'm really interested in where enterprise is spending time right now and energy, and what are those hot topics that people should be aware of when it comes to deploying AI at scale?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thank you for that. I'd start out by saying clearly we're in the midst of what I'd characterize as the next industrial revolution. And this is ushering in a new era of computing and how applications are built and delivered and how we're impacting enterprise knowledge workers and really every industry, almost every job that you can imagine, right, in a positive way. The customers that I meet with, I'd say they're excited about the opportunity, first and foremost, of turning oceans of unstructured data that was previously unminable, now being able to turn that into insight, into decisions, into novel content that never existed before. We're moving from the world of, simply retrieving content that was pre-curated and, served up, sitting database in a warehouse somewhere, and now almost any person can create novel content that didn't exist before. I think businesses that we talk to are excited about the prospect of, for instance, using natural language and semantic query. So namely, the human mouth is the new API, if you will, for creating new content, insights from oceans of unstructured data, PDFs, text, video images even, being able to do things that they couldn't do before. So I think what we're all thinking about now, and I think what we're going to expose today is how we can give enterprises the ability to design and build and even simulate novel solutions and then actually deploy them. So for instance, if you're a manufacturer, being able to do all of that in virtual worlds powered by AI with AI generated data and being able to have much better outcomes once you finally assemble your factory floor, right? Digital twins. So all of these things, the advent of agentic AI, being able to have autonomous skills that work on your behalf in the enterprise, these are things that I think are first and foremost to most enterprise decision makers and to the IT people who are trying to figure out platforms and infrastructure. Our two companies are trying to help them get there sooner.
Yeah, I love the notion that maybe has just been sitting, right, archived for a long, actually useful, right? Think about healthcare records or call records or things of that nature, right? That you can actually now, but that, Chad, that brings a challenge, right? If we're going back historically and pulling not only the data that we're getting created today, but going back in time and looking at decades old data, huge challenges with the requirements to harness and build all that. But what are the trends that you're seeing? I know you do a lot of, well, talking to customers, but probably more a lot of listening to customers. What are you hearing out there relative to either concerns or just some of the trends around AI?
Yeah, well, I have to agree with Tony. It's a killer time to be in tech right now.
It
A
is.
lot of experimentations going on in the enterprise. We've been fortunate to, work with some of the largest enterprises out there in helping them along this AI journey. And we see a kind of a spectrum of, all the way out from training to fine-tuning models, all the way to leveraging existing enterprise data with RAG. And the really cool part, I'd say now, is we're seeing this evolution from just kind of early stage experimentation to really trying to operationalize some of the cool early wins that they're getting. I think a lot of people are realizing that they want to get these wins out to folks to be able to really build better productivity and build new products that open new revenue lines and the like for them. And so at the same time, people are kind of like in this world of constant change, and everything's moving very quickly. And so flexibility becomes kind of like your big friend out there to be able to manage all of these things together. And with data, you have this data gravity concept, and you have this challenge of trying to consolidate. And we'll talk about those a little bit later. But really, if you look at the traditional challenges that exist, still somewhat exist out there, right? You've got a lot of complexity around the infrastructure and a lot of the need for new mechanisms to store things. And the good news is as people move this to production, I think they're starting to rationalize that they need the traditional enterprise class feature sets of reliability and sustainability and efficiency that really was core. Whereas, in the early stage of experimentation, I think everyone was all just about performance. I want this thing to be the fastest thing on the planet. And it opened up a lot of challenges for them where they weren't able to get all of the reliability, and they were stuck with infrastructure that maybe didn't refresh itself consistently and didn't have nice control planes and management of it. And so we've seen a lot of focus on how do I make sure my enterprise is built around an infrastructure that's scalable and also reliable. The last one I'd say is developer productivity. We're seeing quite a bit. Obviously, Kubernetes is a core of what everything's been built around. And so how do I get my developers out of managing infrastructure or dealing with infrastructure challenges and moving into actually building faster? And I think you'll see quite a bit of that evolve, and NVIDIA's done a ton of it. And we've been integrating with a lot of their technologies as well to really make those developers more productive. So exciting times all around.
It's very exciting, but it is also a great and interesting observation that trends continue to repeat themselves, right? Your comment about sheer performance, I think we can go back in times in the last 20 or 30 years, multiple times where both with CPUs, both with GPUs, and certainly with flash storage, the driving factor that people cared about at some point was just performance at all cost. And at some point, as you hit maturity with what you're trying to solve, the ilities start to come into play and are far more interesting. The agility, the reliability, those that you mentioned, Chad. And I think we're starting to, hit that tipping point now where it's not just about how fast you can do it. You got to do it with uptime. You got to do it with being secure. And one that will perhaps, touch on a tiny bit is the ility around sustainability, right? How do we go off and do that? Awesome. Great for context setting for both of you there, both at the compute level and at the storage level. Let's hit into what's holding everybody back. We generally know what people are trying to do, right? Create efficiencies and optimize certain parts of their business. But going from A to B presents some challenges, and there's some commonalities that we're seeing. So, Tony, I'll jump back into you. A couple areas, 2-3 areas maybe that you're seeing that come up again and again relative that are holding people back from getting to where they are today and where they want to go.
Yeah, the thing that excites me most about our partnership is that we're actually solving for what I observe as probably the most important thing holding organizations back from scaling and operationalizing AI. And it's really has to do with enterprise grade pedigree, right? Having enterprise grade tools, infrastructure, platform that business can depend on. And I say this because as we talk with customers, and we just, spend a lot of time talking with AI practitioners and data scientists. We ask them, what keeps you up at night? What prevents you from being productive? And if you look at a typical day in the life of your average model developer and someone who's trying to build applications, they spend a lot of time on things that have nothing to do with the productive experimentation of creating winning models that can be deployed in production. They're babysitting infrastructure. They're wrestling with their peers for getting access to infrastructure. They're trying to manage jobs that inevitably crash and crash frequently. So lots of checkpointing and then restarting and they're engineering software stacks because they're running on less than optimized and a lot of, let's say, non-enterprise grade tooling. So, the way I'd kind of characterize this is that their day in the life is constrained by non-enterprise grade tools for crafting models. They're stuck on traditional infrastructure and tools that are brittle. They're babysitting workloads. And even those who figure all that stuff out, if you look at the compute infrastructure many are sitting on, and I'm saying even in the hyperscale environments, when they look at the utilization factor of the resources they procured, many, if not most, even the best, will tell you that they only get maybe 30% effective utilization of that infrastructure at any given time. And these are wide open published results that you'll see from some of the biggest names out there. But imagine spending $1 and only getting 30 cents back in terms of productive work capacity, right? And that is because of the full stack problem that encumbers most data scientists and developers today. So I think where Pure and NVIDIA are working is to replace unstable, non-proven, lack of enterprise grade, brittle infrastructure tools and platform with something that looks much more familiar to folks who've been buying from Pure and NVIDIA for over a decade, right? We know this stuff very well, and I think we're now bringing that discipline into the enterprise, into the AI developers' hands.
Yeah, I love that. And we've had a number of years to really work together and to get it right as well, right? Going back to 7 or 8 years ago around that. And we're continuing to take it further. But there is this notion of the modernity, right? The how modern your infrastructure is so that you can free up so the data scientists don't have to babysit infrastructure. In many cases, they don't know what's holding them back. Chad, where do we see that happen most frequently in the realm of storage and the realm of data management? What are the contrasts between somebody that's running legacy but doesn't know that there's a better way, and what a true Flash-based operating system with rich features can do for an AI environment?
Yeah, Tony hit on a lot of these. I think first and foremost, the solutions we've been building together with NVIDIA have really enabled customers to accelerate their AI projects quickly, where they have these recipes and build outs of reference architectures to get up and running. But if you look at it, this is a space that's moving incredibly quickly. So you never want to be just kind of locked into a particular core concept. And I think one of the cool parts of our technologies together is enabling customers not only the enterprise class feature sets, but also the ability to have a lot of agility and flexibility in the way that performance capacity is kind of maneuvered around as needed, both in the compute side as well as in the storage side. The second part that I hear from customers constantly is just data consolidation's hard. There's a lot of silos out there. There's information all over the place. And so if you look at it, data is really this foundation that everyone's trying to optimize. That's really where we're seeing a lot of the core benefits today. And so getting data as close as possible to the models allow us to have the most real-time access you possibly could get, so that the experience of users of using this is, very, very human-like. Third is that there's a lot of different workloads in the AI pipeline. We talk about, a lot of people talk about training, and you talk about, consolidation, you talk about inference. This has a very challenging performance profile that Flash is very well suited for. But there's also a heavy metadata component that enables users in Pure's technologies to be able to deal with this multidimensional performance at various stages of the AI pipeline. And that's incredibly important because you don't want to buy 5 or 6 different solutions for each of these stages. Consolidation is important, and being able to do effectively and efficiently is really big. The last one we talked about, the enterprise class feature sets. I think one of the cool things is, getting applications into production from experimentation phase. You don't really want to be buying 2 separate infrastructures for those. So getting thing that's already reliable, has the security features and functionalities already built in and available for you. We hear customers talk about a lot of, I want to make sure I'm buying the infrastructure we're going to put into production. And so, there's just too many science projects in a lot of these ones. And I think people are starting to rationalize, like, I can't go from my traditional HPC science project and now move it into production. They really want production class from the get-go.
Yeah, there's definitely some good optimism coming out of that with some of these possible solutions. Tony, build on that as we're getting late in time here around that light at the end of the tunnel that I mentioned earlier. You have this great notion that I love when we talk around AI factories and what that actually means. I'd love for you to unpack that a little bit as a way that Pure and NVIDIA are working together to help people, execute what they need to get to at this point in time.
If you think about the things that we've been enumerating so far, right? Poor constrained developer workflow, inefficient utilization of infrastructure, brittle tools, all of these problems, we've been actually working on building what we call this AI factory, right? And the AI factory, if you liken it to a traditional factory that takes raw materials on one end and creates finished goods on the other, an AI factory is simply a platform on which you can take, for instance, the inputs, namely your data, your intellectual property, foundational models that match a use case or an application that you're trying to build, and then obviously tooling, software that allows you to enact a productive workflow from data curation to initial prototyping to training to fine-tuning and customization and all the way to deployment in a RAG, right? So when you put those things together, you essentially have an AI factory. And the great thing is that Pure and NVIDIA have the essential elements in the platform on which you can build all of this. So you can, for instance, have a single universal platform that can take you from prototyping to train to fine-tune, deploy an inference, and then feed it with new production data and then further fine-tune, because obviously data drifts over time, right? But that AI factory, believe that in this year and years beyond, every enterprise that is truly doubling down on infusing their business with AI is going to need this for scalable capacity to create models, right? And I'm not talking about like foundational model training. There's lots of great foundational models you can grab off the shelf today, but if you can't effectively customize these models to speak your intellectual property and speak to your customers in the vocabulary that is unique to your business, and you can't do that in a secure, reliable, cost-effective way that's efficient in how it utilizes resources, well, then you're going to have a really hard time making a go of it. So that's why I'm super excited about what we're doing together as companies to operationalize AI factories for businesses everywhere. It's already started, and I think we're going to do a lot more moving into next year and beyond.
Yeah, super exciting to see that going forward. Well, I want to thank you both for your time and your insights today. It was great to dig in a little bit into the challenges, but also then how we can work to solve those, and then some optimism for the future. We're hitting the end of our time here before we get to our special guest. But before we close, I want you each to have an opportunity to give a final statement, a piece of advice you give to listeners when it comes to deploying AI at scale. Chad, why don't you hit first as our Pure representative here? Any final thoughts for the audience on looking forward?
Yeah, so in this ever-changing landscape of AI, we are learning and experimenting all together, and we love hearing from customers to help them along this AI journey. Most of our innovations are built on customer challenges, and so we love to listen, we love to understand, and we love to build solutions that help people accelerate these projects together. So we're excited to chat with you. Love working with NVIDIA, and we're building great solutions together to be able to actually help you along that journey.
Yeah, it's an exciting time for the partnership for sure. Tony, same question for you, just advice. I mean, you just gave us the notion of factories, which I love, but anything more general looking forward for the listeners here today?
Yeah, if you're thinking about AI as a first-class workload, then you need to approach it with the same mentality that, for instance, on which you've built your data infrastructure, your computer infrastructure for years, right? And so Pure obviously has an incredible pedigree in helping you build data pipelines, right, that can fuel AI development from start to finish. And we partner very closely with Pure. Depend on experts, depend on partners who can bring you the expertise. Not everybody comes from a hyperscale environment and has been building scaled out infrastructure clusters or understands the nuance of training and inference. But working with folks who've done this before and do this for thousands of customers around the world, we can bring some of that and share some of that expertise, some of those use cases, and help you hopefully get to a faster path to success than trying to DIY infrastructure and having a lot of challenges along the way.
Yep, that's what it's all about. Well, awesome. Thanks for your closing thoughts there, both of you. And thanks for just a great discussion all around and your insights. Super valuable to have both of you here.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And now it's time to bring on our special guest, Zack Kass. Zack is a futurist and a former head of go-to-market for OpenAI. At OpenAI, Zack built its sales, partnerships, and solutions teams. Today, Zack is a researcher, writer, consultant, and speaker. His work at the University of Virginia focuses on socioeconomic impact of the AI revolution, and his consulting firms help Fortune 1000 companies effectively adapt to the rapidly changing environment. Zack's mission is to demystify AI and help the world build a more beautiful future. That sounds amazing. Zack, welcome. It's great to have you on today.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
Really excited to jump in and hear about all your observations. I know everyone, we've been hearing lots of buzz about this and getting you on, but we got a little bit of background there. What are you working on currently before we dive into everything?
Yeah, well, today the team and I have the privilege of running a consulting firm that operates kind of like a think tank, where we work with Fortune 1000 and governments, in large part at sort of a board and strategic level to think about things like policy and socioeconomic impact, but also to help with AI strategy as it pertains to sort of a 5-year roadmap. The other portion of the business is a content business. So we have a newsletter and we have a couple of books coming out, and it's all sort of fueled by the research that I get to do in my role at the University of Virginia and in my time with enterprises.
Amazing. I always love when we're doing these to dive into the journey a little bit. And when we did the pre-brief, you talked about how you studied both history and computer science at Berkeley, which I really think is an interesting combination. I'm wondering how both of those influenced the way you're able to see things, or perhaps the way that your career path went, and why you looked at studying both of those disciplines.
Yeah, well, I don't actually usually talk about this, but given that the book about him came out, a very interesting book about him came out this week. Benjamin Franklin is my 5th great grandfather, and
wow.
And so it's a pretty direct lineage. So my mom, for example, has his daughter's wedding band. I have the desk on which he wrote The Art of Making Money Plenty. We just got pretty lucky. The sons kept passing down, and then the favorite daughter was my great grandmother, and my grandfather spent so much time. This is my mother's father spent so much time researching his family lineage, and so I grew up with this exceptional interest in colonial American history, in large part because I felt this incredible connection to it. And so I always knew I wanted to study history, and I always read every history book I could find and became enamored with this understanding of sort of how the world works based on how it used to work. and then went to Berkeley and was suddenly exposed to all these ideas of how the world might work in the future. And so had this like really fun exploration of the future tech, which at the time was pretty rudimentary compared to what we're doing today. But also I got to go really deep, and this time at Berkeley studied European history. And so obviously both these two studies give you, as I mentioned, a pretty interesting understanding of the way things were, and of course then the way things might be.
Yeah, there's always parallels that you can draw. I did a little bit of European history as well, and that's always a fun one to see so many diverse things just happening in the last 100 years, much less 200 or many years long ago. But when we look at history, there's also industry trends over the last 50 years, right, that have sprung up. The dot-com boom in the late 90s, obviously, but one that I think when we talked before was interesting as a parallel was around cloud. And I'm interested in your thoughts on the similarities and maybe differences in what cloud technologies and cloud computing did 10 to 15 years ago versus what we're seeing with AI today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's pretty clear that Silicon Valley historians are going to have their work cut out for them over the next 10 years, because just as we thought we were, wrapping up a chapter that would sort of define modern technology, we exploded into a new one. And between cloud and mobile, you have these two paradigm shifts, right? Worlds that, moments that changed how the world worked. And the connections between the two, I think, are pretty obvious. Obviously, we don't know the extent to which AI will play out like we sort of do now with mobile and cloud. But in cloud, you have this advent of distributing compute, and the democratization of storage, the democratization of compute that cloud brought gave way to this incredible new understanding of what the internet could do and how companies could be run. And it just makes running a company much easier, right? It makes powering a business so much easier. And so cloud gives way to this explosion in software, right? And so, the famous expression, software is now eating the world, is basically possible because we can distribute computing. And that obviously gives rise to all sorts of other things like data centers, which give rise to massive new compute requirements, which give rise to massive new energy requirements. So cloud has this incredible, multi-trillion-dollar effect on the globe from a GDP basis, but also from how we work basis. And then obviously AI is going to do the same thing. It already is, and the extent to which it actually changes the paradigm even more is yet to be told. But we can make some assumptions, and I think the safest assumption we can make right now is similar to how cloud gave rise to new business models that were sort of unimaginable before, and access to building companies that were sort of unimaginable before, so too will AI. And I think for two reasons. One, AI as a technology will allow us to build all sorts of new companies, but also AI as a productivity assistant will allow for one human to accomplish so much more tomorrow than they can today. And the expansion of human potential, which is what we talk about in the book coming out in March called The Next Renaissance, is this idea that one person will be able to do so much more in the future than they can today. And that, of course, will have this incredible impact on the way we live.
Let's dig into that a little bit more, because I know people are asking that question of what's the impact today? And of course, we'll go into what's happening tomorrow in the next 3 to 5 years and kind of get your visions as a futurist into that. But what's the impact today? We read different things in the press and online and in social media, but where are the wins? And I think, I love the way you phrased it when we pre-briefed was, where is AI removing the warts from businesses, right? Helping with certain things.
Yeah, so I think there are sort of two ways to think about the impact that AI is having on the average company today. The first is in how their employees do their jobs, and that is sort of best. The easy heuristic there is how is it lowering the cost structure of the business. And McKinsey has pointed to about 30% productivity gains. Bain has pointed to about 20%. I sit somewhere in the middle, about 27%. And our research sort of coalesces around the same idea, which is that employees are much more productive today than they were 3 years ago prior to ChatGPT, Gemini, et cetera. Basically GPT 3.5 and 4 workplace assistants. And that you can think about as like this bottom up productivity gain that's just sort of bubbling now and is like expanding sort of longitudinally and latitudinally in businesses. And you don't have to talk to many people to discover that a lot of knowledge workers are massively improving the amount of work that they can do in a day, which is having some pretty profound impacts on both their business and their lives for that matter. Of course, Copilot claims that about 40% of all code now is written with some material assistant from AI. That's super impressive. And obviously it trickles into industries like consulting and legal and accounting. But then there's this other idea, which you and I talked about, which is this, it actually is not easily measured in productivity, but it's measured in something else, which is how are businesses removing the warts? And when we talk to large enterprises, we basically talk about this idea of what if you could imagine your industry without the asterisk? And so you talk to CEOs around the world and you're like, look, being in this industry is great, except it's something that everyone says. Everyone has accepted for a long time. And that accept is the wart. And there are sometimes many. An airline CEO, I will remain nameless, recently joked to me, he said, yeah, being in the airline industry is great, except everyone hates you sometimes. And by no fault of theirs, by the way. I mean, like, obviously Cloudflare outage notwithstanding, weather just destroys air travel, and then the cost of providing customer service in this unpredictable world is so great. And it's like, well, okay, what if you got off the plane and immediately could talk to someone who understood everything about what you were going through and the shortest path to resolving it, even if it was very customizable and personalized? That we are starting to see, and there are examples popping up across industry where people are starting to say, what if we didn't have this thing, right? What if we could resolve customer disputes in 30 seconds instead of 4 hours? And this is starting to happen. And my favorite right now is actually in primary care medicine. This is the one I keep pointing to because this is something that everyone can relate to right now. A material percentage of the primary care doctors in the United States now are using some kind of app to help them dictate their notes in their primary care sessions. And we've done studies on a few of them, and the ones using an app called Freed, they're saving 3 hours on dictation, which means that they get 3 hours back in the day to either see more patients or to spend time with their family and friends, which just makes the job much more interesting, which would help us turn the negative replacement rate from primary care physicians into a positive one. That to me is removing the wart in primary care. It's a productivity gain, but it is a fundamental shift in how the job is done, such that being a primary care physician is no longer great, except I spend 4 hours of my day writing down the notes, in the computer that I used to take.
So talk about that a little bit more, because I think we hear the threat that AI has to jobs, and again, as a historian, and I would go back in time, if you think about how electricity was done 100 years ago, you had electricity generation on every block of every city, and there were jobs for that. Or if the horse and buggies, right? And the people that made equipment for that. I think people get bogged down with AI is going to replace jobs, and you've just cited with these primary care practitioners, they get 3 or 4 hours back in the day to do other things, or to enjoy their life. Talk about that. Is that a myth? Is that a perception? What's the reality relative to AI impacting jobs in a net standpoint?
I mean, look, at the limit, we don't know. And I would be very, very cautious to say that at some limit, humans will work, quite honestly. And this is, of all my hot takes, I believe we will live biblically long. I believe we will cure cancer and neurodegenerative disease pretty soon. Of all my hot takes, the one that is most upsetting to people is this idea that we might recreate, like that there is an end state where humans actually just spend time in physical community with family and friends.
Yeah.
And I'm cautious to even hint at that because I don't want to lose the audience before we've gotten into the good stuff. But I will say that on the horizon, on the path there to whatever that end state is, it's pretty clear based on any historical precedent that the industrial revolution, the AI industrial revolution, will be an exceptional economic boon, right? Every industrial revolution, both small and big, that we've gone through as a species has been an economic benefit to basically everyone, universally, empirically better off, either because your wages go up, or because you find more work, or your job gets safer, or simply because your purchase power goes up because the deflationary power of the technology around you. Everyone basically wins. The problem is that there are these incredible lulls in happiness and satisfaction, workplace and life satisfaction following industrial revolutions that often lead to Luddite and sabotage movements, where we see people actually try to destroy the technology that stands to benefit them economically, because it is very hard for us to separate the emotional harm done by the sense of the loss of our purpose or identity, even if we are net gained economically. And so when we talk about job automation, or when I talk about job automation in the consulting practice, what we actually talk about is not a job displacement crisis, it's an identity displacement crisis that we're facing. It's not a world where you and I are somehow worse off economically because we've started to automate everything, right? Almost certainly we will feel much wealthier by almost any measure. And by the way, this is not a hot take, right? This has just been historically true. Today is the cheapest day it's ever been to be alive. And there are all sorts of evidence that I can point to prove that. But in a world where our work changes materially and often, it may be very hard for us to say, I feel like I have a purpose and identity because I cannot attach it to my job anymore. And that, I think, is the single greatest threat that AI presents today. And then, of course, in the long term, we have to solve for some other things. But in the short run, over the next probably 10, 20 years, the identity displacement crisis is going to be very real. And we saw it with the dock workers, by the way. The dock workers union, I don't know if folks paid attention, but 2 months ago, they stood up and said, we're going to strike. And in fact, the head of the dock workers union said, I'll shut down the American economy if you automate any more of the docks. And now, obviously, that would be very bad for everyone, right? And so they took a very hard line, and we went and interviewed 4 of the regional dock worker leaders. I mean, to ask them, what do you feel? And all 4 said that they knew that there was plenty of skilled and semi-skilled physical labor jobs available to them. And they also said that the most important thing in their life was their dock work. It was their source of their community, the source of their friends, and their source of their identity. 2 of the 4 said that their fathers were dock workers. It's a 99% male union. And those same 2 said their sons had planned to be dock workers. We are not talking about a world in which we feel like we aren't economically benefited. We're talking about a world in which we feel like we are emotionally harmed. And this is so important for us to start to distinguish as we talk about the real risk of automation.
It's a really interesting distinction to make. Thanks for digging into that for me. Well, let's dig into a little bit. We talked about the productivity gains a little bit ago, but I know also people are tuning in to understand why some of these initiatives and efforts around implementing AI are getting bogged down, and why. Any common threads or themes that you're seeing across organizations, enterprises, how and where AI gets held up or where it gets slowed down?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple themes. So most organizations at the highest level at this point, I think the math is about 80% of Fortune 1000 companies at this point are trying to make AI an important initiative. Somewhere in the top 3 is the math, and the outliers are basically like mining, heavy metals, and like traditional industry, where they're like, it's not really our thing. Now, my caution to them is it probably needs to be, but whatever. So for the rest of these 80% of the Fortune 1000, someone in the organization is basically saying, let's do AI. And the nebulous definition of let's do AI is half of the problem here, right? So thematically, in a world where the technology is moving so quickly, where it can do so many things, where it can have so much impact, it can be very hard for a business to actually confidently say, this is what we need to do. And so the first theme is just uncertainty, right? Uncertainty about what the technology can do, uncertainty about what it means for the business, and uncertainty about who is responsible ultimately. And And so that alone is causing an incredible amount of sort of chaos. I use that term sort of loosely in this case, but strategic chaos, right? What do we do? Everyone's sort of just, looking at each other. Then the next level down becomes something more interesting, which is the theme of lack of adaptability. And so you can go back sort of historically and look at some really interesting cases about businesses that won, not because they knew what was coming, but because they were the most adaptable to it. And I think my two favorite are Netflix and Southwest. Netflix, of course, Reed Hastings talks a lot about this. They had 9 years between when broadband.com, when Mark Cuban sold broadband.com, and everyone knew that streaming was coming because radios had now gone online. So obviously soon TV and movies would. Between that and when they actually moved online, when they shut down the DVD experience, everyone saw it. What separated Netflix was the fact that they had built a culture and had an identity where they said, look, we're just going to keep moving in the direction of the industry. Like, we're just going to keep building towards where the puck is going. And that's why they won, right? It wasn't because they had unique information on the market. And of course, Southwest, the example, which is an important reminder, after 9/11, the way we flew changed forever, both in terms of how we wanted to fly and also how the FAA wanted us to fly. And all of the airlines were so big and so bloated, it was so hard for them to actually say, we can update to these changes. Southwest was a very small, you have to go back and remember, a very also ran regional airline that was just in a position to basically empower the pilots, the ground team, the gate team, and the flight attendants to make changes on the fly. And so they adapted an airline so fast to meet this new paradigm. And so adaptability is the second theme. And it's basically this idea that, look, just because you have a perfect strategy, you know exactly what everyone should do, and you should, you're ready to do it, doesn't mean that your business is actually designed to change. And this is particularly problematic with the Fortune 1000, who are designed actually not to change. It is by definition that the Fortune 1000 are designed to just keep going like the Titanic, because for most of history, that's how you knew you could be successful. Build a huge company and just walk a straight line slowly and surely, right? That was a tried and true strategy, and that's just not true anymore. And then the third theme is expectations. Many businesses have just bad expectations around what AI should do, both good and bad. And so what I think we're starting to see is some companies went out and said, we're gonna silver bullet this thing. We're gonna find the biggest thing, and we're gonna solve the biggest thing. And that's great ambition, but the expectations fell short because the technology either wasn't there or the business actually wasn't capable of adopting it. And inversely, some businesses are like, doesn't matter, this can't do that thing. And then they see their competitors take off, and then they struggle to catch up. And so setting proper expectations around what the technology can do, and OpenAI talked about this a lot, this idea that in fact, the AI game would be won over the next sort of 3 to 5 years at the ground level, at the individual level, where in fact the silver bullet strategies are interesting and can be pulled off, I should say. But in fact, empowering your employees to be 30% more productive on their day-to-day job might be the most interesting thing you can do. And that these massive top-down initiatives, are interesting, but actually may just backfire.
Yeah, there's a common thread around what you've talked about, looking for small wins, small gains, and not doing kind of that moonshot type of thing, which is super interesting. Relative to investment, and again, back to these companies and maybe even the Fortune 1000, there is a notion of a build versus buy type of concept relative to investment choices. On I guess more on the buy side, vendors are looking at technology. Where should they avoid getting caught up in, and what should they look at relative to vendors with which to align?
So, you and I talked about this last time. It is so hard to prescribe someone a build versus buy strategy, right? Because every business, businesses are unique. What you're from industry to industry, but also inside of any given industry, some businesses are capable of building things on their own. Some businesses aren't. And what I try to remind people is, I don't actually think that you are advantaged or necessarily disadvantaged because you're in a build versus buy position. What you what will disadvantage you is picking the wrong vendors. So in a world where you are buying, and frankly building, but especially buying, and making the assumption that of all the things that can change in enterprise, the thing that almost certainly won't over the next 3 to 5 years is the speed with which we procure and install new technology, frankly, right? Like, let's just assume that that is a human thing that requires a bunch of human processes that will take a long time to sort of turn the wheel on. And so when you pick your vendors, you should assume you're getting in bed with them for, 3 to 5 years. That means making sure that you are picking vendors that don't just feature sell, but vision sell. And so one of the things that we talk to with enterprises now is when you select a vendor, it's fine to actually measure them on the features that they have today, but it is more important than ever to ask them in, I think, very simple terms, how do you think we should work in 5 years? How do you think we should do our jobs, whatever the software is solving, in 3 to 5 years? And if their answer is the same, just better with a few more features, you might have the wrong vendor. And I can't say confidently you do have the wrong vendor, because maybe, in fact, that is the right answer. But if the CTO or the chief product officer of your vendor can't confidently say to you, here's the way in which your jobs will fundamentally change over the next 3 to 5 years, and here's how we're going to power that, you are going to you're going to get some serious FOMO when you start to see your competitors who have picked far more ambitious vendors start to actually supercharge and fundamentally change the way they work.
So focus on vision. Okay, that's a good piece of advice there. Self-serving section right here, right? So Pure Storage, we're focused on helping people manage and store and protect their data much more efficiently, and also looking forward at the impact that AI has on data management. What advice would you have for enterprises and organizations looking at how to streamline, how to better manage their data in anticipation of these changes that are going on now, but also in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, the future is vector database. I mean, the future is here. So vector database is it, and we should basically be building towards it. I'm always impressed by how many businesses don't have a vector database strategy or do, but it doesn't call for sort of everything, a sweeping strategy. Embedding OpenAI's embeddings and embeddings products and all the competitive embeddings products in the world now are sort of creating a very inexpensive way to attach vectors to all of your data. And then vector databases are very, very efficient databases, and present an incredible opportunity to store your data in a very organized way. And of course, retrieval means that you can point GPT-4 at a previously sort of dirty database and actually produce exceptional amounts of interesting information from it. And so, people complain about the quality of their database, and I'm like, hey, like, that's actually kind of an antiquated idea. Now, obviously, there's some exceptions to this. There are some industries that can't store data in certain places, and I appreciate that healthcare has very unique problems. Some industries just don't have a lot of data because they're disambiguated from their customer. But to the extent that you do have a lot of data and you can manage it carefully, a vector database strategy is sort of imperative at this point, to making sure that you are robust to a world where everything in your company should be retrievable by anyone with the permissions to retrieve it, and sort of compared to anything else in your database.
Yeah, but it also presents challenges where I know the vectorization of the databases creates far more data, right? So you have this exponential increase in the amount, which comes at a cost and comes at an environmental impact. So what about the challenge that come with that? How to handle managing data centers or doing colo or the mix of cloud? What do you see relative to a solution for that?
Well, at some point there are experts on around every corner of this company in particular that can help you with these specific strategies. My position is pretty simple, which is like, of the strategies you could bet on, data management is about as important as it gets, because what we don't know is, when will agentic AI arrive exactly? How long will we have a HTTP internet versus an agent-powered internet? To what extent will we move to wearables? versus carryables. There's like a bunch of interesting questions over the next 10 years that are really hard to, you really have to squint at. What I can bet everyone very confidently is that the degree to which they can index and retrieve their master data will become a huge competitive advantage in this world. And then in fact, the personalization and customization game is going to be won by the businesses that have the most robust access at the most fine detail to their customers. And I know that data management has been, is like this thorn in a lot of customer leaders' sides, but like, it's just true that it has never been more important because it's the great unlock to solving some really cool problems for your constituents.
Yeah, I love some of those forward-looking areas. I wish we had more time to dig into the wearables and areas like that.
It's simply put, they're coming. Everyone's building towards it. 10 years, I would say 10 years max before it's no longer uncool, right? I think Meta Glass and some of these, it's still a little, but I think 10 years it'll be normalized. Probably 20 years it'll be ubiquitous. Would be my guess.
All right. I want to close with a last one that when we pre-briefed was super interesting and provocative. You always get asked about everything that AI is going to do, right? Zack, tell us, what are all the impacts going to be? Explore the negative space, as you said. What is AI not going to do? And it's an interesting way to close on this, but I think it's really important for people to go away with the right set of expectations and understanding that negative space. What is AI not going to do in general?
Yeah, well, I'll first start by saying I'm an eternal optimist. I just think that the world gets better. I mean, I know the world gets better all the time, and I think the world is going to continue to get better all the time. I have this pretty confident belief that we are not at the peak of society or civilization, and in fact, we're probably very early on the journey. And so it's my answer comes with that bend. But the more we stare at this, the more I come to realize something that sort of gets me out of bed every morning, which is in a world where AI ends up solving a lot of the computational problems in our lives, it pretty clearly doesn't solve for a lot of the humanistic problems. And there is a reason why we so desperately want physical community, why we are so eager to spend time with friends and family, why this return to office is actually going well for most companies, because it turns out that one of the immutable qualities of being human is actually being in community. And it stands to reason that in a world where AI actually ends up automating a lot of our computational work, it will almost certainly not automate our most humanistic work and qualities. And so what I tell people these days, and it sounds very lofty, but I actually think it's quite true. And I'm already seeing it in my hiring patterns. In a world where you can be anything, right? Being knowledgeable suddenly becomes far less interesting, right? Being skillful at some limit, anyways, becomes less interesting. Being adaptable, being courageous, being curious, being wise, being empathetic, these things actually may differentiate us individually and collectively on the long term. And so I tell people, young people ask me all the time, what should I study in college? I say, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's a fast decreasing correlation between your major and your economic outcome. Do not study something because you think it's going to make you a bunch of money. You have no guarantees in that. What you should do is study something you love, because the act of learning will teach you how to learn other things. And the most fascinating thing you can do at this point is become a learner, become a thinker. And so basically my message to people is hire for, manage for, incentivize the most humanistic qualities in people, because we basically all know the same thing. This device has never been smarter and is only getting smarter, but it doesn't actually solve for the fact that, how we make each other feel may remain the most important thing we can do.
It's actually a really hopeful way to finish this conversation. I appreciate that, looking at the distinction of still what it means to be human versus machine. And I love that message around study what you love. I have a 17-year-old right now who's just getting into colleges, and that's part of what we discussed is go study something you love. So
every art history parent loves this message, by the way. They're like, oh, good, my child has a future. But I mean it. I think it's absolutely true. It just doesn't matter what you study anymore. And by the way, in 30 years, I'm not sure it'll matter if you go to college.
Yeah, we'll see that whole recreation piece. Well, you've given us a lot to chew on today and to think about both within enterprises and organizations, but in general, just about what we can expect or maybe see in the next 3 to 5 years and beyond. So I really appreciate that, Zach. Any final words of advice that you want to give to people around AI?
Have a fantastic end of year. Be kind to your friends and family. Talk about an optimistic world. Talk about a future where we've solved fusion energy. Talk about a world where we've cured these immutable diseases. The indicators are flashing green. As scary as the world might feel right now, I remind everyone you are simply overexposed to negative information and underexposed to positive information. And we would all be better served by just talking to each other about the things that are going well in this world. Negativity bias is not your friend anymore. It served you when the woolly mammoth was outside the cave. It doesn't serve you anymore.
Love it. Fantastic. Well, thanks for your time today, Zach. I love this conversation. Appreciate it. Hope everybody out there, you got a lot of great insights as well. If people want to find you, and if people want to find you digitally, that was the last one. Just anything to plug on where to go to get more information and follow up. I know you've got that coming out.
It drives the team crazy. I don't use social media. I have this version to it, although we're going to start using it. But I have a newsletter, Zack Kass. .substack.com. You can find it on my website, zackkass.com. We don't sell you anything. We just every 2 weeks tell you about the ways in which the human potential is expanding.
Beautiful. Thanks for that. Thanks again, Zach. And with that, we will move on to the next segment.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. And of course, before I let you all go, I'm sure you don't want me to forget about our prizes. We have done a draw for all of you that are in attendance today, and I'm happy to bring Roman back so he can announce our winners.
Thanks, Rob. If you are one of our lucky winners today, Pure will be sending you an email to let you know how to claim your prize. Now, let's get started with today's draw. We're choosing 2 winners today, and those people will receive either a Nintendo Switch Lite or an Apple 4K TV. Let's see who our first winner is for the Nintendo Switch. Danny S. from Walnut Creek. And now let's draw for the Apple TV, which will be going to Calvin T. from Markham. That concludes our draws for today. Congratulations to our winners, and thanks to everyone for your participation. Back to you, Rob.
Congratulations to our winners, and I want to say a special thanks again to our panelists for a great conversation. Of course, to our special guest, Zack Kass. What a great conversation that was with his insights on AI. Thanks so much for spending time with us today. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we have and I have. Have a great day out there, everyone.